If you use timber, you need to watch this video.
When you're buying timber for a project, it can be quite daunting. You've got all the different types of wood, all the different grades of wood, and you don't know what to look for and what to buy. So sometimes you'll buy a wood that's not really right for your project, and you'll do the project and the project won't come out very well, and you'll blame yourself. You'll say, oh, I'm no good at it. And basically it's not necessarily your fault. It's basically because you're not buying the right materials. So in this video, I want to break down and explain what materials to look for and what materials to use for each project. I don't want to go into too much depth. I don't want to scare you, but I just want to make it a little bit easier. So next time you go to the wood suppliers, you can know what to ask for, what to look for, and hopefully save you a few headaches. Okay, so if you start at the top, you've basically got two types of wood. You've got your softwoods like this, like pine, and then you've got hardwoods like this. This one's beech, but you also have things like oak. So you've got oak, beech, you'll have mahogany, or loads of different types of hardwood. A lot of the hardwoods now are banned from use in the UK. I'm not sure about other countries wherever you're watching this video, but a lot of the hardwoods aren't available, so it's always a good idea to check with your supplier. And especially when a customer will ask you to make something out of a particular hardwood, and it might be that you can't even buy that hardwood. So it's a good job, before you tell the customer you can go ahead and make that project, it's a good job to check with the suppliers and just make sure that wood is available before you go any further. So I want to start with softwood. Now this is Quebec pine. You've got different types of pine. As I say, this is Quebec, which is a very dry pine. This pine comes from Canada. A lot of the pines will come from places like Finland, Sweden, and used to come from Russia, but at the moment we're not allowed to buy wood from Russia because of the Ukraine war. So a lot of the softwoods come from sort of Finland and Sweden and that sort of area. So when you're buying pine, pine would be used for things like furniture, carcassing, stud work, roofing, things like that. It all use pine. Pine comes in different grades. Used to say things like fifths, fourths, unsorted, and unsorted is like the best pine you can buy. But now a lot of it's gone on to C16, C24, and the C stands for coniferous, which means it comes from a coniferous tree which has cones, and the number is 16 or 24. The higher the number, that is the better the grade of wood. So that's pine. Let's go on to hardwood now. Now this is hardwood, this is oak, and say this is beech. As I say, a lot of the hardwoods aren't available now, so it's always a good idea to check. The difference with hardwood is, as the name says, it comes from a deciduous tree, which means it comes from a tree that has leaves, and it's a lot slower grown, so the grain is a lot tighter, so it's a lot harder wood. A thing to bear in mind is, if you're going to make something out of hardwood, just make sure your machinery is up to the job, because you will find you need really sharp blades on your cutters and things, because you will find you'll get things like this burning, and it can just burn motors out on machines if you try and cut it with a blade that's not sharp. So as I say, that's hardwood. Now hardwood, as opposed to softwood, hardwood is a lot more expensive than softwood. A good sort of indication at the moment in the UK is hardwood is probably twice the price of softwood. So if this piece of softwood costs you £1, these pieces cost you £2. So that's basically how much difference. It's a massive difference. So you need to bear that in mind if you're quoting for a job or costing a job out. You need to make sure you're very careful. If the customer changes from softwood to hardwood, don't think you can sort of absorb it on the price, because you'll probably find you'll just be way out of pocket. So that's hardwood. So now, hardwood and softwood, when you're buying any type of timber, you want to make sure it's FSC approved, which is basically the Forest Stewardship Council, which FSC stands for, and that means that it's been sourced from a sustainable source, so you know that it's not damaging the environment. Now, another type of pine is pine for outdoor use. You can use pine outside, you can use hardwood outside, but doing an outside project, I would recommend using a treated timber. As you can see, this is treated. It's got a slight green tinge to it. Sometimes it'll be a sort of brown tinge to it, and it's been treated. It's been pressure treated. What they do is put the timber in a vacuum tank, they put the preservative in, and then they draw the air out of the tank, and that forces the treatment right into the core of the wood. So it's protected and it will last a hell of a lot longer than just basic softwood that you've treated with just a brush-on treatment. Okay, so next we've got engineered woods. Now, engineered woods are things like MDF, plywood, chipboard, insulation board, things like that. Things that are made out of small pieces of wood all glued together. So it's not actually a solid mass of wood. It's basically a glued up piece out of small particles or small veneers like in plywood. So that's a basic engineered board. And then another board we've got here. This is a laminated board. I don't know if you can see that. It's basically strips of wood all glued together. That's called lamination. What they tend to do is just glue boards together, or they'll glue not necessarily thin pieces of timber like this. This is about 18mm thick. You can buy things like roof trusses and things that are laminated together, and they laminate them together a lot of the time, either to make them stable, like this is glued together, and you'll see it in things like wake surfaces and things. They're glued together in a plank configuration. That's basically to make them more stable and stop them curling and twisting. In roof trusses, they tend to laminate timbers together because it increases the strength of the timber, so you haven't got all the grain running in one direction. The sort of grains running in different direction, so one piece is working against the other, and it makes the timber a hell of a lot stronger. Another thing to look for when you're buying timber, not so much with the hardwoods because you won't get it in hardwoods so much, but in softwoods, a thing to look for is knots. This is basically where the branches come out of the tree. And sometimes you'll get knots that are quite large like this one, and sometimes you'll get what's called a dead knot, which basically is a knot that will just drop out. And basically, if you machine that up for a project, it's useless. You can glue them back in, but it's not ideal. So that's another thing to look for. And you will find the cheaper timbers will have more knots in them, or basically sometimes you'll find that they'll have more splits and shakes in them. So that takes me nicely on to costing of timber. Now, when you're buying timber, you're going to be really tempted to shop about and go for the cheapest timber. That's fine if the quality is the same, but be very careful when you're buying timber that you don't just get focused on the sort of cost of the timber and you go for the cheapest timber every time. Always weigh up the sort of price with the quality, because what you'll find is if you just go for the price of the timber, you'll buy a timber that's really cheap and it'll do the job, but it won't last. So down the line, if you're looking at it long term, then probably in a few years time, you're going to end up having a lot more maintenance on that timber, or even having to take that timber off and replace it because it won't last. So it's always a good idea to weigh up the price and the quality and get somewhere in the middle so that you've got a mediocre timber at a mediocre price. Don't always go for the cheapest price unless you get offered some really good quality timber at a really cheap price. That's fine, but don't lower your quality of the timber just because it's cheaper. And finally, what I want to talk about is moisture in timber. This is another biggie when buying timber. Always try and get some timber, if you're using it for sort of cabinetry or joinery, that sort of work. Always try and get timber that's below 20% moisture content. I mean, the Quebec I showed you earlier, this is only about 6% moisture content. It's very light, it's very dry, and it's very nice to sand because it sands very easy because it's so dry, so it doesn't clog your sanding sheets up. It's a lovely wood to work with. Not as cheap as normal pine, but by the time you've weighed up the cost of sanding equipment to sand it, you're probably around about the same price. Most of your timber you buy, especially the pine, you'll be working around about the 19% moisture content, somewhere around there. But as I say, always ask, if you're not sure, ask your supplier what the moisture content of the timber is,